Hi, it's Patrick O'Driscoll here. You might know me as Pods. I'd like to welcome you to the Adelaide Hills Farmcast. It's the podcast we produce for the love of farming right throughout the Adelaide Hills region. And now, I'll hand over to Adelaide Hills Farm Services' very own Belle Baker. Over to you, Belle.
Thanks, Pods. Hello and welcome to this month's Adelaide Hills Farmcast. Today I'm recording at the Littlewood Agapanthus Farm with Tracey Cook. Tracey and husband John have been running Littlewood Agapanthus Farm for a while now, so they're old hands at this farming bizzo. But Tracey tells me it wasn't always smooth sailing. Hi Tracey.
Hi Belle.
Thanks for having us at Littlewood Agapanthus Farm. It's a wonderful place to be, beautifully manicured lawns and gardens. What a wonderful little spot or heaven in the Adelaide Hills.
Oh, thank you very much. We do love it. We love getting up every morning to this.
Yep. Even on these cool mornings here in the Adelaide Hills.
Well, the other thing about being here is that you often get a mist in the
lovely.
valley. I don't know whether you see that in Littlehampton, but there's a mist often every morning which then lifts, and that's really quite magical.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
Winter's just as good as summer.
Yes, absolutely. Tracey and I are going to have a little bit of a chat about Littlewood Agapanthus Farm and what they have to offer here for visitors a little later on. But initially, I'm going to work my way through the Adelaide Hills Farm Services farming calendar to see what small acreage or lifestyle farmers and property owners should be thinking about during May. If you're new to the Adelaide Hills Farmcast, we've divided our farm calendar into different sections to cover the main land uses in the hills. I do take liberties with this each month, keeping the information concise and practical. If there is any particular information you're looking for, please let me know. I'm always keen to help and welcome your feedback. Let's roll up our sleeves and get started. Everything I'm about to discuss can be found in the show notes for the episode in your podcast player or on our website, adelaidehillsfarmservices.com.au. Livestock. Last month I talked about doing fecal egg counts so that you can understand the worm burden in your stock before drenching. It's not too late to do this, and I would always suggest taking the time to get your samples tested means you can put a drenching program in place that is actually effective. We heard recently we had a client in the school holidays looking for activities for their kids, so they went out on a Poo Collection Adventure. I think it's a rather grand name for...
What a great idea.
I know. Can you imagine? Because as we know, kids love grot and mud and poo and anything that's a bit gross. Needless to say, I'm told they had quite a cross-section of samples to choose from in the end, not all of which made it to the fecal egg count selection part of the process. Tell me, Tracey, have you got a PIC number here?
We have.
Right,
yes.
Excellent. I knew you would.
Yes.
A PIC number, for those who don't know, is a property identification number. If you have livestock, sheep, cattle, alpacas, goats, even chickens, the lot, that you want to sell, keep as pets, send to an abattoir, or in fact are born on your property, you need a PIC number. The cost is nominal, currently $93 for 2 years. The process can easily be completed online via the PIRSA website, and I've included the link in the show notes. The reason I'm suggesting that you get on with this minor administrative job now is that I'm hearing that there is up to an 8 to 9 week wait for new PIC numbers. If you're keen to move some livestock off your property before it gets too wet or inaccessible, it might be a good idea to start the process now. The penalty for not having a PIC number can be a fine of up to $10,000, and that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. I have heard it was enforced recently, probably not to the 10,000 level, but way more than I'd want to be paying. Now, alpacas. I learnt some really interesting facts about alpacas, their anatomy, management needs and their foibles. I was given a comprehensive handbook on managing alpacas in Australia, an easy-to-read guide that reinforced everything I learned on the day. To their credit, the Australian Alpaca Association encourages all registered breeders to give a copy of this guide to new owners when they sell an alpaca, so if you don't have the guide, perhaps ask for it. This is a fabulous initiative that I would like to encourage all breed societies, cattle, sheep, goats, horses, the lot, to consider introducing, particularly those that are breeds that are popular with small lifestyle farmers like Dorper sheep or Angus Murray grey cattle, particularly aimed at those people who don't naturally come from a farming background who could really benefit with key information on how to look after their stock. Do you have alpacas here, Tracey?
No, we don't, Belle. Our neighbours do, and we love to see them as we ride by on the horses.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, they're a lot of fun, aren't they?
Very cute.
They are. If you own an alpaca or 3 and you haven't given much thought to them aside from sharing them, then here's a list of things to consider and a few alpaca facts that just blew my mind. Alpacas are members of the camel or camelids family. As such, they have toes, not hooves. That was news to me. I'd never looked that closely at the feet of an alpaca.
Me either.
Their toes need regular trimming, at least 6 monthly. Using a pair of garden shears works well. It's recommended that it's done at shearing time, ideally because they're already in the yards and being handled, and again 6 months after that. If your alpacas are living on hard rocky ground, they may wear their toes down naturally. However, here in the Adelaide Hills, the ground, even when dry, is too soft for that to happen on its own. Alpaca's teeth also need grinding down. Now, I can't cope with this. Apparently, you can do this with a big file, one of those industrial metal-looking workshop-style files, but to be honest, it doesn't sound like much fun to me. We would suggest, Pods and I would suggest that you would get your shearer to do it. They generally have all the tools you need to do health checks, etc. Joyle and Porter did demonstrate how to file their teeth down with an electric grinder, and I did put that on the socials a little while ago, but I reckon, personally, it's best left to the experts. In saying all that, apparently alpaca breeders hold regular shearing or health days where you can take your alpaca to their property or back to their property and get it shorn or castrated and the health checks done. This sounds like another brilliant initiative and well worth taking up. If the breeder you got your alpacas from hasn't said anything, perhaps ask or go to the Australian Alpaca Association website, find a local breeder and ask the question. Now, May is the ideal time to administer their annual vaccines if you didn't do it at shearing time and a drench. You always shear in the summer because alpacas do struggle in the cold. So shearing is only ever done in the summer months. Alpacas are generally vitamin D deficient. It's recommended that vitamins A, D and E are administered together subcutaneously. Alpacas are very good at regurgitating, and this can mean that your precious vitamins and or drench end up on the ground. That could get a little bit expensive, and we get it done before the cold, wet winter sets in the Adelaide Hills. Now, big question, how do you know if your alpaca is deficient in vitamin D? It's an excellent question. I'm so pleased you asked, Tracey. I know, right? You may notice your alpaca lying on its back with its stomach facing the sun. This is their way of absorbing vitamin D.
How amazing.
I know, right? So if your alpaca's lying there, legs in the air, sunning itself, it's not trying to be dead, it's trying to sun itself. However, apparently if it's facing the other way, away from the sun, you might have slightly more problems than vitamin D deficiency. So got to be on the lookout for the sun in those sort of scenarios. But I think it's fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. So it might seem like common sense to some, but I have to admit that this next bit, I hadn't given it any thought. If you want your alpaca or your alpacas to act as guardians or to protect your lambs, you need to introduce them to the flock of sheep at least a month before lambing. It makes sense, really.
Yes.
This will allow time for your alpacas to bond with the flock, and then they will intuitively protect the lambs. If you have too many alpacas to sheep, i.e. the ratio is too high, the alpacas will form their own flock and not bond with the sheep at all. Now, I get it now that someone's told me. That is common sense.
Well, you know, it never ceases to amaze me, but herds flock together.
Yes.
We've got one guinea fowl that thinks it's a horse.
Yes.
And it lost all of its flock, and now it's herded with the horses.
Right.
It never leaves them.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think things do flock together.
Yes. Yeah. It makes sense now I'm being told about it.
But they protect each other and look out for foxes, etc.
Yeah. It's
amazing.
Yeah, it is. Now for the fun stuff, we didn't think that was fascinating enough. And who knew I would be raving on about alpacas? Who knew that I would actually, seriously, I love them.
They're gorgeous.
I know, aren't they? Potty's getting me an alpaca for Christmas.
Oh,
can't wait.
Lucky you.
Yes, I know, right? Did you know, do you know how to tell the difference between a male and a female alpaca?
No.
No, other than, of course, if you've got them in the yards and you have a physical look.
Yeah.
Male alpacas pee forward in spurts, and female alpacas pee backwards through their back legs in a steady stream. Mind blown. Seriously, who knew that?
Who knew?
No. So, yeah.
Who knew?
So I've spent a lot of time in the last week.
So all you need to do is watch them weed.
Watch them weed. So I spent a lot of time in the last week staring at alpacas in random paddocks going, are you a male or a female? Anyway. Also, the other interesting thing about alpacas, female alpacas, they have what's called an induced ovulation. They don't ovulate regularly like other animals and women. They ovulate when a male alpaca is introduced to the yards or the paddock.
Handy.
So, I know, right? I think it's great. I mean,
and then they don't have to go through all that PMT and everything else. Unless it's necessary.
Unless it's necessary, absolutely. So I just thought that was great. So that also means you don't have to get everything in sync if you would, like, it's great. So you don't have to time everything with its cycle. You just,
nice.
Cool. And the other thing, and see, I don't know, I'm probably just a little bit fangirling on the alpacas at the moment, but have you ever thought about how you would pregnancy test an alpaca?
I haven't had that thought.
No, and I hadn't either. But what they do, breeders do what's called a spit-off.
Huh.
Yeah, so this is what happens. So they line all the female alpacas up and then they introduce a male. And if they are pregnant, they will spit at the male, right? So like a defence mechanism. If they are not pregnant, they won't spit. They'll probably sit down or cush, I think the word is, to be mated.
Oh my God.
Right? So, and it's 95% accurate. So who needs to spend money on a vet when you've got alpacas?
Fabulous.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
And it's been tested. You know, these people the other day were saying, well, they weren't sure, so they brought the male alpaca back in a few days later, and same thing happened. It works.
Wow.
I know, right? No, but it's just evolutionary animals.
Amazing.
Yeah. All right, so that's the fun stuff. So get back onto your productive gardens. Now, do you have vegetable gardens and things here as well?
Yes,
of course you do.
Got an orchard and a veggie garden.
Yes. All right. So now's the time to give your garden a bit of love. It's the perfect time to add fertilisers to your soil and get your garden beds ready for planting again. If you've been using the same soil, perhaps in a raised garden bed, my personal fave, because last time I looked, rabbits can't jump, so I'm into raised garden beds, it can be a good idea to empty it all out and give it a full refresh. I've been hearing a lot about raised garden beds being prepared in layers, starting with a type of weed matting or cardboard, followed by twigs and branches, then adding compost and finally a good soil mix. The jury's out as to whether this is really a good way to go. I get the idea in principle, to be honest, I do, but surely when everything starts to settle, you'll find yourself having to top up the soil. Tracey, is that what you do?
Well, I follow the Hugel bed thing.
Okay, we need to Google that.
You can Google.
Yes.
But I have found that it really, really works well.
Okay.
So I did a couple of experiments.
Good.
With my garden beds, and I've only got them raised a little bit. So I don't have like a big raised garden bed. We do have rabbits.
Yes, good. I mean, only because that means I'm not alone.
No.
Sorry.
So what you do with the Hugel system is you put down big logs all on the bottom layer, right? Big logs, and you think to yourself, oh, gee, I should break them up or something. No, you don't. You just put the big logs that you get from the paddock and put them all down. Then you put in your compost. We make our own compost. So we collect horse poo.
Yep.
And oak leaves, particularly, because they're wonderful.
Right. Writing this down, everybody.
And grass clippings and everything else. And we have big piles, which we then overwinter. Yeah. And through the summer, we try to make them get up to a pretty high temperature, so that kills the weed seeds.
And
And then we use that in the garden bed on top of all the logs.
Yeah.
And we often will let it sit, particularly over winter, for a while. And those garden beds have been the best produce for me than anything else.
Wow.
Yeah. And what happens, I think, the idea of the logs underneath is that they just generally break down slowly in time. They're organic matter.
Do they not go mouldy?
No. Well, no, you don't see them because they're covered with.
And do you reuse
dirt.
those logs the next year, or how often do you regenerate
well, I've
beds?
left it for the last 2 or 3 years, and I just top up with some compost each year. But apparently, depending on the size of your logs, I mean, you can probably leave it for quite a few years.
Wow, that is fantastic. Well, that's what I'm trying this year. We have plenty of wood and everything around the place, so I'm definitely going to be giving that a go. How do you deal with weeds on the bottom? Do you put a weed matting or cardboard, or do you scoop it all out? There's
nothing.
Nothing.
No, just on top of
grass.
The ground.
Or
no, it's not grass really in the orchard. But it is weeds. I mean, we have marshmallow, we have cape weed, we have all sorts of things. We've pulled a lot of that out, we've sprayed a lot, but on those garden beds, basically I pulled the big stuff, just put the logs on the top and the compost.
Yes.
Done deal.
Right, amazing. You are making this a whole lot more simple than I had it.
Well, I like anything simple, and I'm really into no-dig gardens too.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes.
I don't know whether you know Charles Dowding, you look at his stuff, but the no-dig gardens
I'm writing that down
really
as well.
Good. So the less you disturb the soil, the less weeds you're going to get. And that is something that we found when we first moved here, because we did a whole lot of stuff that was really dumb.
Yes.
And found that it made us have a lot more work.
Yeah, yeah. And look, the same principle in larger broadacre cropping, etc. The more you till the earth, the more you actually bring those seeds, the weed seeds up. That's exactly right. Okay. Right, well that is really interesting. Now the other thing, and I haven't seen any around here because I think you're pretty diligent, but I don't think we've hit full-on snail season yet because the soils are still warm and we haven't had a lot of rain. Snails and slugs are best spotted first thing in the morning when they come out from their hiding spots, often under agapanthus. Do you find that?
We do have snails in the agapanthus.
Yeah, but controlled, I imagine. I mean, you know.
Look, we actually don't do anything about the snails in the agapanthus.
Right.
Because we find
they're
that
vigorous enough.
The agapanthus are vigorous enough that they withstand the snails.
Yep.
And the snails basically only go for the soggy yellow leaves that are sort of underneath the agapanthus anyway.
Which I saw on one of your YouTube videos. You actually demonstrated that really well.
Right, thank you. So we do get snails. They do like agapanthus, but they don't do much damage to the agapanthus.
Right, okay. Good to know. All right. Now, look, you can use snail pellets if you don't have small pets around, but truly there is no better feeling than the crunch of a big snail under your foot.
Absolutely.
That is just one of the best things. Now, moving on to bigger pastures, Pods and I sat down with Michael Bowden of Hills Farm Supplies recently. Bodes and Anthony Pearce have been running Hills Farm Supplies for over 10 years now, and we often partner with them when we're helping our clients. Bodes' biggest message for May was to look out for capeweed, geranium, flatweed, barley grass and silvergrass. To be honest, he sort of went on a bit. There were more than I could write down quickly. As they emerge, as the paddocks green up, which makes sense. The ideal time to hit these weeds, he says, is at the 2 to 4 leaf stage when their leaves are growing and their ability to take up chemical, if you're going to deal with it, is at its greatest. Hitting them at this point also means that they don't get a chance to outcompete the good grasses or pasture before they get up and going. If you're not sure what weeds you've got or whether they are in numbers that may need control, take a photo and email it and take it into your local agricultural reseller and see how you go from there. How do you get on with weeds here?
Oh, well, we've got plenty of them.
You know what? I'm pleased to hear that we're not alone here. That's great.
So in the pasture, we do spray.
Yes.
And we wait until the clover has 3 or 4 leaves on it.
Yes.
And then we have somebody in to spray for capeweed.
Yes.
I anticipate this year it's going to be shocking because last year it was so wet we were unable to spray.
Right.
So this year we'll be right on it. And then of course, because we have manicured gardens and because of the weddings, etc., we've got to be onto it all the time. And so what we've done over the years, and we've learnt this really makes a big difference, is when it rains, you know that you're going to get these little weeds emerging.
Yeah.
Kill them then. Do not hesitate.
Yes.
Just kill them.
Get on them.
Get out there, spray them.
Yeah.
We've tried to do as minimal as we can in terms of using sprays. We don't really like to use it, but here you have to, unless you know you.
Well, you're a commercial operation, aren't you?
You're going to get taken over with it.
Yeah.
However, we've reduced our spraying a lot, and how we've done that is by mulching. So what we do is we let it rain, we let the weeds emerge.
Yes.
We spray them and then we heavily mulch.
Yes, yeah.
After that, all you have to do is go along and pick out the odd ones that are weak in their root system anyway because of the mulch.
Yes.
And it's so much easier.
Right.
And the other thing I was saying before, Belle, about not digging too much.
Yes.
If you don't disturb the soil too much, you're going to be a lot better off. As soon as you start digging soil and all of that, you're going to get a huge amount of weeds emerging.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that's good advice. Excellent advice. The other thing to be aware of is that window for spraying blackberry and other woody weeds is closed now. This is because the plants become dormant in the cooler months, meaning that the potential kill you get from the application of chemical is greatly diminished. The plants just don't take up the chemical like they would in their growing phase. So we're still getting...
so true.
Yeah. And we still get phone calls about blackberry, but we do tell people just to hold off now until November, December, and we can go from there, because they really are not going to grow a lot in this winter period anyway.
No. And it's an absolute waste of time and money, because if the plant's not taking it up, it's just a waste of chemical.
Absolutely. Our conversation with Bodes then moved on to pest management in pastures. Bodes and Pods met at Ag College at Roseworthy back in the day, so they have quite a shared history. The conversation was quickly railroaded by a rather hilarious recollection of them both failing an entomology project on red-legged earth mite. Oh. Now, Bodes tells me he eventually got a pass after looking over the shoulder of his then girlfriend, now wife, Alice, and doing a little bit of seeing what Alice had done. Now, I went to school with Alice, so we have this whole... I know, Adelaide. I know, ridiculous, isn't it? Small world. Of course, both Pods and Bodes made me promise that I wouldn't tell anyone, so there we have it. But I digress. So my point being, red-legged earth mite remain dormant in the soil in the warmer months. The eggs hatch when we get a series of colder and wetter days. So just now, they still wouldn't be out now, early May. You're probably, if you're listening to this early May, you're really not going to see any, because we just haven't had a wet enough May. But once it gets wet, they get active. They love to hide under broadleaf weeds like capeweed, and the way to find them is just to literally look for the damage. If you take a broad or a helicopter view of your pasture, you may notice some yellowing areas. And also in large lawn areas, they tend to hide in those covered areas near fence lines, etc., just like snails. But if you take a helicopter view of everything and you see some yellowing areas, then go in and take more of a macro view and turn the leaves over, and you'll probably find red-legged earth mites. The next thing to consider is whether they're in numbers that warrant chemical intervention, keeping in mind that when you kill the bad bugs, you're also killing the good bugs. So exactly how much damage are you going to be doing? In Bodes' words, and I love this, he said, it's about good stewardship of your land. It's about observing the potential threats and assessing whether the risk is worth the reward. And I love hearing that from somebody in the industry who makes money from selling the chemicals that do this, but that there is still an observation that, blanket chemical killing of bugs and weeds isn't always the solution.
Exactly.
Love it.
Belle, can I just ask you a question?
Yes.
Are the red-legged earth mites sapsuckers?
Yes.
They suck the sap of the plant. Okay.
Yes.
All right, yeah.
If they're not, Pods and Bodes will correct me, and I will do a retraction in the next podcast if that is not the case. But I do believe they are.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will give you a few ideas of what you could be thinking about and planning to do on your property. Now, I'll be back next month with some more timely jobs to add to your to-do list. And don't forget, all the notes are in the show notes for this episode at AdelaideHillsFarmServices.com.au. Now, before I chat with Tracey, I just want to play the interview that I did with Pods about fencing materials and where the industry is up with that. For this month's interview, we're doing something a little bit different. We thought it might be a good time to catch up on some information that's coming out about fencing materials. So whilst I don't usually record the conversations Pods and I have, I thought it might be a good idea to do that on this occasion. So I thought I'd find out what's the latest information you have on the supply of fencing materials, Pods.
Thanks, Belle, and it is a good time to discuss this. I have found that fencing materials are getting harder to access. I think I can break this down into two categories, being the timber-based products, being our posts, CCA, creosote, and rails, and then the second category being our steel-based products, being wire, cyclone, steel droppers, steel posts, etc. Both are becoming increasingly hard to access. I think the timber-based products are being driven by the fact that...
You mean the shortage of them?
Or the shortage of the timber-based products is driven by the fact we're competing with the housing industry and the building industry with the advent of the 2020 Home Builders Grant.
Yep.
So the building industry is going gangbusters, and we're having to compete against the building industry, coupled together with the fact that some of our timber mills are currently out of production due to the floods in New South Wales and Queensland of last month. And then with our steel-based products, I think this is partly or mainly due to the fact of it being a perfect storm in the agricultural sector at the minute. Beef prices are at record highs. Lamb and mutton prices are very, very strong, as are wool prices. And I think, as we all acknowledge, farmers are very good at spending money, and rightly so, are putting money back into their own business by doing a lot of fencing.
Or investing in their infrastructure.
Investing in their infrastructure.
Yeah. And that's not just fencing, is it? We're also finding that with cattle yards, the availability of...
Cattle yards, sheep yards, shearing sheds and the like.
Right, okay. So is that a short-term or a long-term problem? Is fencing over, or is this just a short-term delay in supply?
I think it's just a short-term blip on the radar, but it's certainly something we have to be aware of at the moment.
Okay. Are there any alternatives to the steel or the wood products?
I guess the only product I can think of off the top of my head is the Wood Shield product.
Yeah, right.
Manufactured in Melbourne. That is a timber-based product that is untreated, but it has a very, very hard plastic coating around it.
And that's a recycled product, isn't it?
And that is a recycled product, environmentally friendly.
Organic, certified organic.
Completely certified organic, and is a very, very strong product.
Yeah. Okay, so there is an alternative if you want to go down that track instead of waiting for the traditional wood products for posts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. With the steel, the wire and things, there's often two types. There's the Australian made, which is our preference, the Waratah products, but there's also another one that the steel comes from overseas. Is that a shortage problem as well, or just the Australian made products,
I think it's across the board, Belle.
Right, okay.
Driven by the fact that there's so many farmers out there wanting to reinvest in their infrastructure on property.
Okay. So other than going to, a Wood Shield product as an alternative, what can we do about it? What can our clients do about it, or what can we help our clients do about it?
I think one of the only real ways we can offset the problem to some degree is if there's any people out there who are just starting to think about a fence or part thereof of a fence that needs replacing, or indeed they're wanting to change a grazing system upcoming and put in some smaller paddocks, whatever it be. I think now more than ever, we've always said planning makes perfect, and this is an exact example of that thinking and planning a longer way out, and then talking to your reseller, talking to your contractor, putting some orders in place quite some time out is going to offset your requirement of waiting
or any
for
delay
material.
that might happen. Yeah.
And any delay that may happen.
Yeah. And so one of our pet things we love to talk about is when somebody has they've purchased or are about to purchase a new pup and it's due to arrive in, say, 8 weeks' time. It's been born and you're waiting for it. And what we generally say and have always said, that when you purchase your dog, that's the time to think about secure, safe fencing for your dog, because when it arrives, and absolutely, but once it arrives, it's almost too late, and there's just very little ability for us to help you out with your fencing at short notice.
Absolutely spot on.
All right. Thanks, Potty. It's been fun. Let's do it again.
Good one, Belly.
Thank you. That was Pods and I talking all things fencing materials and their availability at the moment. If you'd like any more information about fencing products, we encourage you to speak with our local agri reseller or give us a call on 0429 130 673. We're always happy to help. Tracey, thank you for hosting us today. We're recording this Farmcast out in amongst the Agapanthus. Well, not exactly. We're under the pavilion, aren't we? Are you able to describe our surrounds and what you have here at Littlewood Agapanthus Farm?
Sure. We are at the top of a hill, a gentle slope, I suppose, and we're sitting in the pavilion area, which is where we hold the weddings and functions. And we're looking out over the gardens, over the lawn, into the little sunken garden bed and the trees, and looking out into the pasture. Or that's our hay paddock actually out there.
It's a wonderful view from up here. You can see quite some distance, can't you?
You can, yes.
Have you always been open to the public and run events here, or is that a fairly new initiative?
We're open for Agapanthus sales Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays generally, not public holidays.
Yes.
And we think that we're going to take August off. For the first time in 5 years.
Right, good idea, excellent.
Yes, but, and we have often, in the season when all the flowers are out, we often have tours, bus tours and that sort of thing. A lot of seniors come in, which we absolutely love them.
Oh, how fantastic.
Yes.
Yep. So I've watched a few of your YouTube videos and I must admit I found them really, really engaging and I've learnt quite a lot. I've definitely been dividing up my Aggies the wrong way and leaving them clumped up for way, way too long. Have you always been an avid gardener or have you been sort of quick to learn on the job, so to speak?
Well, a bit of both.
Right, so you've been here 6 years?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have always been an avid gardener.
Yes.
Have always loved doing my own veggies and eating my own produce and that sort of thing. And John as well. My sister did horticulture, so she's been a great help to us.
Wonderful.
Extremely handy. And but when we got here, look, I thought there was just a blue and white Agapanthus, you know, the standards that you see everywhere. I had no idea that there were 200 varieties in the family. And we've got 20 varieties, some of them quite rare.
I'm looking forward to having another look around in a minute, actually.
So it's been a huge learning curve, and we also, when we bought the property, we didn't think that we were going to buy, you know, 58 acres, which we have. So we've actually had to learn how to manage the pastures and how to manage the animals and all of those sort of things. It's a huge learning curve.
Yeah, yeah. And what are you doing in the garden at the moment? What jobs have you got lined up for May?
Well, we always say that autumn's the most important time in the garden.
Right.
So that's when you're setting up for everything else. And we have in January, coming up this January, the first time, we're doing an essay open gardens.
Oh, are you?
So we're absolutely
I love going to those.
Beside ourselves about, oh my God, we can't even have one weed.
Well, I look forward. I'm going to talk about that in the December, January podcast. How fantastic!
Oh, thank you. But you know, so we're really trying very hard to prepare for that. But in any case, autumn I think is the time when you have to prepare for the rest of the season. So we are really busy. We don't divide our Agapanthus until April, May.
Right.
Generally.
Yeah.
You can do it any time of the year because they're so hardy, but the best time for us is April, May. The soil's still a bit warm, but you haven't got those burning days.
Yeah.
And you're looking forward to a bit of rain coming, so you're not having to, we're not on mains water here, so we have to conserve water.
Yes.
We're doing all of our pruning because we want to burn everything off that we've had from last year, which is coming up. Our big burn-offs are coming up, and we want to reduce...
30th of April, I'm waiting.
That's right.
Yep.
Want to reduce any fuel load, ready for fire season next year. So we've got huge burn piles to do, but because we've had spring growth and summer growth, and now a lot of things are sort of dying off, we need to cut everything back.
And do you get in there with a sort of, Pods' idea of gardening is to get in with a chainsaw, or are you slightly more, or a hedge trimmer? Are you slightly more elegant than that?
No. Oh. No, absolutely not. We do, after the Agapanthus have finished flowering, we deadhead every single one of them. That's 300,000 at least flowers that we deadhead.
Right.
That's a big job here, and we've just finished that. And that takes us some months. With the miniature Agapanthus, we use a hedger for those. Yes. We have lots of hedges here, and we use electric hedges. But some of the hedges, particularly when we arrived here, were just overgrown and everything was too big. So we have used chainsaws and really chopped it back. And started it's again. Worth doing that well, because otherwise every 5 minutes you're out with your electric hedger. Yes. You know, so... If you think ahead, you try and save yourself some work.
Yes, yes. And look, I was going to ask you about how you manage snails and my own personal nemesis, the rabbits. Now, snails, you're pretty okay with. The rabbits, though?
Look, we do have rabbits here, and I'm often talking to a lot of my clients, and apparently at the moment in Mount Barker they are plague proportions.
They are, that's right.
And I've got lots of gardeners coming in saying, please tell me that the rabbits don't eat agapanthus, because we cannot give anything in the garden.
No,
Luckily, they don't eat agapanthus. No. Very occasionally, on a miniature agapanthus, you'll see a rabbit nibbling on a root, but they don't generally kill them.
No.
And so we do have, and we did have when we first arrived here, a lot of rabbits. So we've done a system where we put out baits of pindone.
Yes.
And also we shoot them.
Yes, excellent. So we talked about how to manage rabbits in the last episode, and Rob Murphy from the Hills and Fluria Landscape Board suggested that you actually need a multi-pronged approach. Any one thing wasn't going to be enough, but that together with the the pindone and shooting, but also to destroy their burrows as well, so that the new ones don't come in and just take over. So
that's exactly right. And sometimes if you're planting young plants, and I've had this problem, they'll really go for the young plants. So I have glass cloches that I put over young plants until they've grown up enough that the rabbits aren't so interested.
Yeah, right. Because I must say, in my own garden, the only thing the rabbits aren't eating are my agapanthus, which is very exciting because it means I still have something to look at in the garden.
That's exactly right.
Yes, it's fantastic. And now, look, we've heard anecdotally, or perhaps a little bit more so, that there are a lot of European wasps around at the moment. We've noticed quite a few. We're on the other side of Littlehampton to you. To where we are now. Tell me, this is a leading question. Come on, Tracey.
Have you got any nemesis? I hate them so much. Look, we do have European wasp. This year is particularly bad.
Why do you think that is?
Because we've had a mild season.
Yes.
We had a fairly mild winter. If we get a very cold winter, it will kill them.
Okay.
And in Europe, that's why they are not so bad, because where it's freezing cold and snowing in Europe, they will actually die.
Okay.
So each year the nest dies.
Yeah, right.
In Australia, we don't get that because we have...
Even here in the hills, does that not get...
Well, I think it does.
But we did have a mild winter last year.
But we had a mild winter. Yes. We didn't have those, 0 and 1 degrees so much.
No,
where you get up and you have to chip the chook's water, ice off the chook's water.
Yes, yes.
And so I think that's one of the reasons we've got more this season. So they probably haven't died off as much in their hives. And so you can get hives where there's 100,000 wasps if they don't die off.
Really?
Yeah. Normally the workers will die and the queen goes down into the hive and then keeps laying eggs. So that's been a problem I think this year. And I have done numerous things to try and kill them, and I've studied this.
All right,
absolutely.
Okay.
So one of the problems, because we do weddings and functions, we can't have European wasps.
No, of course. You can't have the bride getting hysterical over a wasp bite. No, that's bad.
And you don't want them around your food.
No, no.
So one of the things that we do is try to make sure that every bit of food that they might be interested in is not available.
Removed, yep.
So unfortunately, if you've got pets like dogs and cats and that sort of thing, you've got to get rid of all that food because they'll be after it.
Yes.
They have an absolute flurry of activity February, March, April now, ready to try and get all that food, bring it back to the nest, ready to so those babies are all fed.
Yes.
So if you can track them down. So if you put food out, they particularly like chicken.
Okay, writing that down.
Particularly like chicken, I've found. I've gone through all the cat food with the sardines and everything else, but I've found
prawns. They like prawns, but I'm not about to go.
They love snapper heads.
Right. That could be smelly if they don't.
I have particularly found chicken they like.
Okay.
I've put out things like jam and honey because they like sweet things as well. And so then you watch where they're coming from. And if you can, provide some sort of meat that they can pick off a little bit of, because it slows their flight down.
Oh, okay.
And then you can see where they go. And you know how when they come down to food, they hover and they go from right to left, it's really annoying.
Yes.
Then they'll settle on the food. Once they pick a little bit of that food off, they'll go up and they will fly straight.
Ah, okay.
So if they're coming from the
You really
nest,
are.
yeah. They've got no chance with me.
How
So
fantastic.
if they're coming from the nest to the food, they will fly straight. If they're coming from the food to the nest, they'll fly straight.
Okay.
If you see them flying straight, you think, right, they're coming from that direction. Okay. Now it's very hard to then, because they could be up to 500 metres away.
Wow. Yes.
So then you keep moving your food until you find, okay, we're getting a lot more wasps coming. We're getting, and then you start looking generally in the ground and it will be a hole.
How big?
Look, it can vary, but
really?
it's usually about 50 cent,
So-
or perhaps a bit bigger.
Yeah, right.
And it's very, very often next to a fence post.
Really?
I have killed 6 wasp nests all next to fence posts, right on the fence post.
The holes in the ground that I've been looking at have been way smaller than that. So and I haven't seen anything going in and out, but I've got a few of those.
If there's nothing going in and out, that's not a
so
wasp
are they
nest.
always going in and out?
Always going in and out.
Right.
Except in winter when they're dormant,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
but at the moment, they're nuts. They're going in and out all the time.
Wow.
So there have been a couple of nests that I've killed that have not been right next to fence posts, but they're often near.
Why do you think that is?
I think because when you drill a hole for a fence post, probably you've disturbed the soil and you've made it easier for them. The soil's not compacted.
Yes.
So they can get in there and they can dig out that soil.
You know what? I'm loving chatting here, but I'm in a rush to get home to check out my to go for a walk around the fence post to check it out.
Yeah.
That is, I haven't known where to start.
All right, so that's what you do. And then once you find out where they are, you wait.
Okay.
Right. Do not approach them at daytime.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, you're going to get stung.
Yeah, yeah.
So you wait till it's dark. You get your torch and you put a little bit of red cellophane over the torch because they don't react to that red light.
Okay.
Right, and then you get your gloves on and everything else just in case. Then you go out.
I did not know this conversation was going to go here. This is fabulous.
You go out with your wasp
Yes.
stuff. I find the powder best.
Right.
It's about $7 from Bunnings.
Right.
You go out to the hole and you'll see them in the inside of the hole.
Right.
Don't disturb them too much because they will come out
So
at
you
you
do see-
at night. Oh, yes, you see them. You can see them right in the hole there. And then you puff that powder down the hole and you want to put a good 100 grams down there because it's got to go right down in to kill the queen.
Right.
And that's it. They're gone.
Tracey, wow. I feel like we this interview may have got a little bit longer than I had planned. But I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I think it's very worthwhile. I feel like I need to have perhaps done, the feature interview, of this, but we might get you back again because that is amazing information. Because I wanted to ask you, I hear cattle like eating agapanthus. That's great. We don't have time for any of that.
They love the seed heads.
Yeah, right, the seed heads
Full
particularly.
of protein. And they do like the leaves and as I was saying before, my husband John had them analysed and they are an A-grade fodder for cows.
That is remarkable
So
because
we feed all our
everyone
cows.
has agapanthus in the hills. Yeah. Probably just the one or two varieties, common varieties. But next time they're trimming them all, throw them over the fence to the cattle.
They love them.
Watch the
They
cattle
come
grow.
running.
How fantastic. That is wonderful. Look, thank you, Tracey. Thank you so much for
Absolute
hosting us
pleasure,
today.
Phil.
It's been, wow, my mind is blown, not just by alpacas, but now by European wasps. That is amazing. And look, if anyone's interested in finding out more about the Littlewood Agapanthus Farm or booking a function here, we'll put the your contact details on our show notes.
Thank you.
And people can go from there. And I think we'll do a little bit of a cutout from this and feature that as well.
Fabulous.
So thank you so much, Tracey.
Thanks, Belle. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you for listening to the Adelaide Hills Farmcast. We hope you found it really helpful and just a little bit entertaining. You can leave comments and send questions on the show notes page for this episode, which is on our website, adelaidehillsfarmservices.com.au. Just click on Farmcast and look for the May episode.
Thanks for listening to the Adelaide Hills Farmcast. Belle and I hope you found it helpful. You can leave comments and send questions on the show notes page for this episode, which is on our website, adelaidehillsfarmservices.com.au. Just click on Farmcast and look for the May episode.